Hello, it's Clint Bussey again, and as I said, I am making a video about my experience at the memorial last year. But before I talk about that, I want to say that last year I went to several different Kingdom Halls, and some of the Kingdom Halls I went to on a number of occasions. I repeatedly went to them, and I want to say that it was rare that the Jehovah's Witnesses and my old friends and relatives acted the way the Stockbridge Kingdom Hall acted. So, even though I don't agree with shunning, and I don't agree with many of the doctrines that the witnesses have nowadays, not all of them act like fanatics. They are human. They're normal. And many of them are very uncomfortable with shunning family members and shunning friends. So a lot of them acted on their normal human response to a person that says, hey, they talk to me. And I think that's the reason why I encourage people to go back and talk to their relatives and their friends. It don't have to be at the Kingdom Hall. Go to their homes and face them. I chose the Kingdom Hall just to help everybody see that barrier should be broken down and that the ice should melt. I wanted to do it in public. But, it's hard to shun people when you're faced with shunning them. And it's not going to cause them to have an emotional meltdown. It actually, even if it does cause a lot of anxiety, it's part of the healing process. Because shunning is a cult tactic and it's very unhealthy for both parties. So I think that whereas you should be concerned for their emotional welfare and you shouldn't want to cause damage to somebody, you need to think about also yourself and the emotional damage that's being done to you. You need to respect yourself, even as Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. So anyway, but back to the memorial subject. I did go back to the memorial last year, and I went to my mother and father, Tommy and Linda Bussey's hall, and I went with my wife and my 2 kids, and they allowed me to come in. And like I said, that congregation was more reasonable. Although they asked me, was I going to cause a scene? Of course, said no. But last year, I actually partook of both the wine and the bread, and I take that very seriously. And here are the reasons I take it seriously. And to say, the elder that gave me the wine saw me drink it, and then he gave me the bread. So he didn't try to keep me from having either one of the emblems. So, they were actually very reasonable. But let me tell you why I partook. First of all, if you read John chapter 6, it clearly says that he that does not partake of the blood and the body of the Christ will not get everlasting life, and will not be resurrected on the last day. It's, says nothing about a supposed anointed remnant and other sheep. To me, this is the same as the Catholics' clergy and laity. And really, although the witnesses don't tell anybody not to partake, they have definitely made a doctrine that discourages partaking. Now, they have the right to not partake. That, sure, of course, that's their belief. But, and this is where I'm going to get. This is what I'm going to get to. Here's another reason I partook. If they do not believe the other sheep should partake, and in most congregations there are no anointed, why do they pass the wine and the bread? Why would they do it if they're not going to partake? Because it looks like they're rejecting Christ's sacrifice. In fact, in certain Satanist groups, they have a black mass where they pass the wine and the bread, and they reject it. So they mimic those Satanist groups. Now, if they meant to do this or not, I don't know. But maybe only the anointed remnant should have this communion, and the other sheep should just have a meeting that night. Why do they have to reject it? So I did that to show too that we should accept the benefits of Jesus' sacrifice. It's funny that the Jews under the Mosaic law were to slaughter a lamb, the Passover lamb, and that signified that one day when Jesus came, they would slaughter him, for forgiveness of their sins, because they offered him up to the Sanhedrin and then later to the Roman authorities. So what does their rejecting the blood and the bread represent? Maybe it represents something. Maybe there's some reason that this was put into effect. But thirdly, I wanted to break down that barrier that somehow only these certain men are special and they're the only spokesman for God. It's very cult-like. In my opinion, everybody should feel free to partake. However, you should definitely do some soul searching and thinking. To me, Jesus stood up to the Pharisees and the scribes because they kept people in bondage spiritually, and he didn't take it anymore. And because of that, and because of opening up their minds and breaking the chains of their spiritual bondage, he was put to death for it. And now, in this day and age, because of Jesus and because of his followers who stood up, even some after Jesus, Martin Luther stood up to the Catholic Church. I believe he was also executed, and several others have been martyrs for the cause of freedom and truth. Nowadays, if you stand up for your religious rights, your spiritual rights, your rights as a human being, up against discrimination or whatever it may be, in America, you have certain protections now. They won't put you to death. So, really, we should be very grateful to those who were brave enough to stand up and even die for our freedom. Now we're free. We're free. And we should not let any religion, whether it be the Jehovah's Witnesses or the Catholics or whatever, shut our mouths and tell us what to think and what to feel. And if we don't agree with them, to shun us or to call us sinners or whatever else. That shows we do not appreciate the sacrifice that Jesus and the apostles and the rest down through these last 2,000 years who have stood up for our freedom. Yes, we should partake gladly. Thank you. Thank you for not keeping silent. Thank you for standing up, even for human rights. So, those are the reasons I partook, and they let me partake. So, I think that maybe this year we should go back to the memorial. Those of us who have been disfellowshipped, disassociated, who've just left, and not necessarily to partake. That was my decision. I did that for my own reasons, But to go back and see your relatives and see your friends and talk to them. Don't let them shun you, Say how much you miss them. It's silly that we put up with this in a free country that gives us freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of the press. Why would we? Why would we do it? If we stand up and stop allowing them to abuse us and to dominate us as slaves, they won't have the power to do it anymore. It just doesn't make sense to me. Why we would do it? They have no power. They have no real power. Why do we give them the power? So anyway, I say this year, let's go back to the memorial and not put up with the shunning.